targeting to the Asian American community.
We need the black community to realize that black people are hurting Asians, and they need to speak out in their own.
For weeks now, we've had the white media trying to manufacture a phony outrage campaign about black people attacking Asians. This has, we know, been nothing more than a white media false flag operation. This is what Malcolm X talked about when he said that with skillful manipulation of their media, they can turn the perpetrators into the victims and the victims into the perpetrators. When the white media talks about this flood of alleged anti-Asian attacks, notice that they only mention the same 3 or so incidents while they're trying to manufacture this narrative that, oh, there's just black people coast to coast just going after Asians. Just anytime an Asian leaves the house, here's a black person. Hey, you. They keep doing that, but they only mention the same 3 or 4 incidents. Only one of them that they mentioned was fatal, by the way, but they keep this reporting on a non-stop loop over and over again because they're trying to make sure that people remember this particular media propaganda. Mainly that they remember that the alleged perpetrator of these attacks are black. Flooding the airwaves and online with this anti-black propaganda, it was all going so well. Until reality came and crashed the party. All the white media's phony outrage and hysterics about some alleged black person allegedly arguing with an Asian in an alley somewhere, that whole narrative fell flat when people saw that no, white supremacists are the ones who are harming Asians, and they don't do it through arguments or even a fistfight. They do it through mass murder. But here's just a few highlights of white supremacist aggression against Asians. Vincent Chin, killed in 1982 by 2 white men. His killers got no jail time. Nguyen Phan Nguyen, beaten to death in 1992 by a gang of white men who shouted white power. Michael Cho, shot to death in 2007 by police in La Habra, California, who of course were not punished. Thang Nguyen, shot to death in 2016. Neither of the 2 men involved in his death were charged. 2017, Ying Ying Zhang, a college student, was abducted by Brent Kristen. He raped her, beat her, cut off her head, and mutilated her body. Oh, is that a little bit too far in the distant past for you? Not recent enough? Okay, here's a few more closer to the present. 2019, Arthur Matanovich killed 3 Asian men in New York by beating them to death with a hammer. He said he did it to protect Asian women from abusive Asian men, and you'll find that delusion about white men trying to be heroes, thinking that they're being heroes for Asian women, that's a common theme that you'll find with these white supremacists who kill Asians. March 10th, 2020, John Wiseman called the police and told them that his Asian wife was on the floor unresponsive. He left out the part about how he'd shot her 3 times. At least one of those shots was in her back as she lay on the floor dying. Multiple witnesses reported that the couple had a volatile relationship characterized by disputes over money and infidelity. One witness told authorities that Wiseman wanted a divorce, but was unwilling to divide their money and property equally because he, quote, earned his. May 2020. A Seattle-based amateur MMA fighter named David Altamar accosted an Asian couple walking in their neighborhood. Altamar is also a suspect in several other hate crimes against Asians. He'd broken into an apartment complex to, quote, locate and attack North Koreans. He also broke into a building owned by Google and was talking about killing North Koreans. In another incident, Altamar went to the University of Washington armed with a baseball bat and looking for North Koreans. For the record, the Asian couple that he threatened were Chinese, not Koreans. July 2020, Susie Zhao, a professional poker player, was raped and burned to death while she was still alive. Her killer, Jeffrey Morris, has prior convictions for 3rd-degree criminal sexual assault and misdemeanor domestic violence. He's currently pending trial. November 8, 2020, Kanaquan Smith was shot to death by her husband, Scott Smith. He had filed for divorce a couple weeks before he killed her. He claimed that she tried to attack him with a butcher knife, so he had no choice but to kill her. Well, that's one way to get out of paying alimony, but he didn't have anything to worry about because white privilege is the order of the day. Prosecutors dropped all charges against Scott Smith, saying that there just wasn't enough evidence to charge him with anything. December 23, 2020. Just 9 months after Minneapolis police murdered George Floyd, police in California kneeled on Angelo Quinto's neck until he was unconscious. He died in the hospital 3 days later. Keep in mind, this was only 9 months after the murder of George Floyd, which was still fresh in the national consciousness, by the way. Due to the similarity between the manner of killing of Floyd and Quinto, this killing did manage to get a few headlines, but what it didn't get were any international protests by Asians like they did to protect Peter Liang after he killed Akai Gurley. If any incident should have galvanized Asians to replicate the totally unprecedented response and support they gave to Peter Liang, it should have been the killing of Angelo Quinto. But it didn't. A few tepid protests was all it got, local protests. And then, nothing. Most of you hadn't even heard of the killing of Angelo Quinto until I told you about it just now. March 10th, 2021. John Stryden sexually assaulted an Asian woman in a San Jose train station tunnel. Prosecutors are handling this as a hate crime, but we already know that they're going to quietly drop the hate crime enhancements as soon as the cameras go away because white privilege. Just 2 days ago, Tuesday, March 16th, Robert Aaron Long decided to go on a cross-state kill spree in Georgia. He killed 4 people in Cherokee County, and then he went into Atlanta and killed 4 more. 6 of his 8 victims were Asians. In fact, it was Asian massage parlors, quote-unquote, that he went to perform his executions. He claimed that the reason that he did it was he was a sex fiend and, well, he couldn't control his urges. A captain in the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office said that Aaron Long was having, quote, a really bad day. Yep. When these white supremacists see one of their own pull off some killing, they immediately circle the wagons and get on code. So as you see, there is an epidemic of attacks against Asian Americans, but it's not coming from the black community. The attacks are not in the form of arguments or fistfights, they're in the form of killings. Mass killings in a number of cases. And yet, for some strange reason, a lot of the people who have been conveniently indignant, trying to find some way to invent a phony narrative that black people are targeting Asians, the United States Congress hasn't held any hearings about what's going to be done about all the killings of black people, but they're holding hearings now about what are we going to do to help protect Asians. Dion Lim and other sock puppets for the white media, they've been making sure to include that, well, what are we going to do about policing in these areas? We need greater police presence to be ready to take on these niggers. These race attacks you see. On Twitter, I pointed out how one white supremacist in particular, calling herself Allie Beth Stuckey, posted a tweet saying that Tuesday's mass killings can't be called an act of white supremacy because, quote, the recent crimes against Asian Americans have been predominantly perpetrated by people who are not white. This is precisely the talking point that the white media wants to feed to the public. This is what their goal has been. You have an undeniable act of mass slaughter of Asians committed by a white man, yet what is this white woman's very first act? What does she do? She denies the obvious racial motivation, and instead she runs with the narrative handed to her by the white media that a mass killing doesn't matter. Why? Because a non-white, read black, people were the ones committing all the recent anti-Asian crimes, or at least that's what they're going to say. But there's another point here. While this Murtanovich character bears full responsibility for his actions, we must also ask why he thought Asian women would appreciate him killing Asian men. White supremacy has engendered a belligerent self-entitlement into those that it classifies as white, so they automatically believe themselves superior to those who are classified as not white. In fact, this Mertanovich person claimed that he was inspired in part by movies that he had seen depicting Asian men as oppressing Asian women. These so-called Asian Lives Matters, it's a safe movement to white supremacy because it's not a threat. It's a non-threatening media invention, one that doesn't threaten established white power. When you see ABC give a platform to Juju Chang so she can spout blatant lies and have a white man saying the black community needs to recognize that it's attacking Asians, and nobody points out that white men like him are murdering Asians en masse, that's how you know there's a program at work here. But don't have been a lot of people reminding Juju Chang of what she tried to pull. And like a coward, she's been too ashamed to say a word. Well, that's fine by me, as I've taught you, white supremacy will never admit that it's wrong, so it's foolish to wait for a confession. You'll know when white supremacy has conceded that it's lost the argument, not by them giving a confession, but by the sound of silence.